Hello, and welcome to Shadows and Secrets Deep Dive Series. I am Kerry Savage.
And I am Samantha Skal, and together we are Shadows and Secrets, a writing retreat for mystery and thriller authors and horror, we just learned.
And horror. You can find out more on shadowsandsecretsretreats.com.
You sure can. So we are both book coaches and authors, and we love talking about story. This is our series. This is I actually don't know which one this is, Carrie. Is this number seven, six?
I think it's six. I think it's number
Okay.
six.
Yeah, so today we are on our sixth installment of our deep dives, and this one is Amy Tintera's Listen for the Lie. We're holding it up.
Hmm.
Um, just an absolutely incredible book, which we'll get into. But this is a huge spoiler alert warning. We're going to keep saying that. And it's a deep dive into scary books we love, where we talk about twist, structure, masterful misdirection, villains, and anything else that strikes our fancy about MTS, which is mystery, thriller, and suspense. But first, before we get into any of this, I'd like to introduce my co-founder of Shadows and Secrets, Carrie.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, I'm Kerry. I'm a writer and a book coach, and I love working with writers to make their fictional ideas come to life. I'm super into immersive settings and details that really pull you into a book's world. So that's a little about me now. Tell people about you, Sam.
Oh, thank you so much. I am also a book coach and an author, and I love working with thriller, mystery, and suspense writers to plan and write twisty novels. And my superpower is brainstorming twists and villains, particularly. I just love it.
Can confirm she's really good at it too. So, another reminder that we are going to be giving away everything. So that means key plot points here. So if you have not read Listen for the Lie, please hit pause, go read it, and then come back.
Yes, seriously, we're going to leave no secrets unturned, so consider this your final spoiler alert warning. The structure of these talks is the same every time. We'll read the book jacket copy and then what the author has done to manipulate us before we even start.
And then we'll read the first page and talk about what the author has done to manipulate us there.
And then we're going to break down each of the major twists in terms of how the author did it, what percentage of the way through it happened, and what on-screen clues existed so that the twist actually landed.
And we'll also talk through how the author accomplished the overall misdirection and manipulation of the reader, and the way the author used language or setting or other elements to set the reader up for maximum fear.
Exactly. And this is why we read the scary shit, because we like to be scared by fiction, right?
Hell yes.
All
All right.
right.
Are we ready?
So
You ready to
we
get into
are
it?
ready. Yeah, let's show the thing one more time. So this is the book, Amy Tintera, Listen for the Lie. Genius. I could not be more obsessed with this book. And this was one that you found, Carrie, right? This was a recommendation. You read
Yes.
it and you were like, you need to read this immediately.
Yes, and it was recommended to me by someone who actually is not a huge MTS fan, but she happened to read it and was like, "You are going to love this." And she was right.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely incredible. Um, yes, I had a thing, but I totally forgot it. So why don't you kick
It'll
us
come
off
back to you.
by by reading the book jacket copy?
Okay, so here we go. What if you thought you murdered your best friend? And if everyone else thought so too? And what if the truth doesn't matter? After Lucy is found wandering the streets, covered in her best friend Savvy's blood, everyone thinks she's a murderer. Lucy and Savvy were the golden girls of their small Texas town, pretty, smart, and enviable. Lucy married a dream guy with a big ring and an even bigger new home. Savvy was a social butterfly loved by all, and if you believe the rumors, especially popular with the men in town. It's been years since that horrible night, a night Lucy can't remember anything about, and she has since moved to LA and started a new life. But now the huge hit true crime podcast, that was a really hard to say,
Yeah.
Listen for the Lie, and its two good looking host Ben Owens have decided to investigate Savvy's murder for the show's second season. Lucy is forced to return to the place she vowed never to set foot in again to solve her friend's murder, even if she is the one who did it. The truth is out there if we just listen.
Mm.
Mm, so good.
So we've talked about book jacket copy in the past as like a really good exercise for writers to be able, if you can distill your book down into two, maybe three paragraphs like this, you have a hit.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard, and it is often hard because we do have too much complication going on. And so I think that this book is not uncomplicated, right? There's quite a bit going on underneath the surface, but there is like this one through line. Um, that I think that Amy Tintera did very, very well. And Amy, please write more books. This was amazing.
For sure.
If you happen to see this. So I wanted to talk about the title, actually. Listen for the lie is
Mhm.
just like you read that and you're like, I'm already listening for the lie. Like, how are you, protagonist, book, like structure, how are you going to lie to me out of the gate? And I was curious if that kind of affected your view of it too, because you know, I came to it knowing that this was like a really good MTS book, and you recommended it to me, so I knew I was going to love it. But Listen for the Lie, just it's such a genius title in
Good.
terms of misdirection, right? Because there are lies, but it's not from where you think they are.
And I think the other thing that I really, and having just reread it for this, I read it a while ago. So I've now read this book 3 times and it never fails
Same.
to
Yeah.
delight me. I think what is has struck me most is that like there's such this theme of who do we listen to and who do we
Yes.
believe in this
Yes.
book. And it's done so subtly. She doesn't hit you over the head with it, but it's there throughout. And if you're paying attention and you see that, you're just like, oh, you've been pointing me to this all along, both in the plot and on the theme level. So that's one thing that's just so genius about it is like it works on those multiple levels. Just to your point,
Ugh.
why it's such a great title.
Yeah. Yeah. This book impressed me so much.
Mhm.
You know, it's the kind of book that I aspire to write. And,
Mhm.
you know, I think a lot of people probably do. Because again, as you just said, it's so layered, but everything is so tight too at the same
Mhm.
time. Um, so anything else about the book jacket copy you want to say? It's delightfully misleading.
It
Um,
is delightfully misleading. And, to my point in my confession a few deep dives ago that I don't read book jacket copy, I did not read this book jacket copy before I picked up this book. So it's so interesting that it is to your point, just there about like the misdirection. Like, yeah, I mean, I can read this and say, like, yes, this is not lying to you about what kind of book you're going to
no.
read. But it also is like, oh my gosh, this book is just, there's so much more going on here than what is there. So probably also an excellent point about trying not like don't feel like you have to get everything in your book into these 3 paragraphs. Like your
Oh
book
God,
can do
no.
so much more than this. But
Yeah,
but this is a great little way to hook. This is how you're hooking people and getting them to.
totally. Yeah, I mean, I just the line about the kind of the who, what, where, when section, you know,
Mhm.
like who Lucy is, who Savvy is, and this hook of like, what if you thought you murdered your best friend? I mean, that's the story question. Is like, did she do it or not? And she can't
Mhm.
remember. And so
Mhm.
it's an exploration of what do you really believe? Are you lying to yourself? Is everyone else around you lying? And it turns out, yes, they are. Um, and then what if the truth doesn't matter? That I just want to put a pin in because that I think is like the core of the emotional arc for her. And that realization at the end that the truth does matter, but it's how it's said, it's like it just all the lying and
Yeah.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
a
it's really
line that
good.
I think I'm sure that I called out and for myself when I was making notes for this at the very end. So we'll talk about it a little bit more, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yes, we sure will. And then just the second to last paragraph, like this concept of like she doesn't know if she's done it and there's a podcast trying to uncover what really happened and there's so much push pull there like those forces of protagonism and antagonism like we're rooting for Lucy from the beginning, she's our protagonist and she
Mhm.
has a delightfully like delightful voice, which we will get into in the first page. And this was the reason that Carrie wanted me to read this book
Huh?
is because the first line of the first page, you're just like, oh, I'm in. Yes, I want to hear about this person. But the setup here, so we have these forces, we understand immediately what we're going to be dealing with. And it's not a traditional like it is a who done it, but it's
Mhm.
also it's more psychological than I think I initially expected, right? Like there is a murder, like there's a
Yep.
body, you know, the body's already done. So this is an investigation of what actually happened that day and the
Mhm.
murders in the past. So we're dealing with story present drama and trying to figure it out.
Yep.
Um, but it just I don't know. It's yeah. Okay. So shall we talk about the first page
Get into
and
the delicious first page, which I will
delicious
also
first
say
page?
for anyone who caught my workshop, I think it was for Crime Writers Week on voice, tone, and setting. You heard me talk about this book
Yeah,
because I thought this is such a voicey book and it's wonderful. Like she does such a good job and it immediately hooks you in. So that's all I'll say.
sure
And
does.
we'll read it and you can experience it for yourself.
All right. Shall I go for it?
Jeez.
All right. So, chapter one, Lucy. A podcaster has decided to ruin my life, so I'm buying a chicken. It's fantastic. I make
Mhm.
plans for this chicken as I sit in my cubicle at Walter J. Brown Investment Services, waiting to be fired. I stopped pretending to work 2 hours ago. Now I'm just staring at recipes on my phone, dreaming about sticking lemons up a chicken's butt. It's an apology chicken from my boyfriend. It's like that engagement chicken, the one woman who the one women make to persuade their boyfriends to propose, except this is a sorry I didn't tell you I'm the prime suspect in my friend's murder chicken. Apology chicken for short. Lucy, I look up from my phone to see my boss standing at the door of his office. He adjusts his tie and clears his throat. Could you come in for a minute? He asks. Finally. They clearly decided to fire me this morning. Glass office walls are a strange choice always, but especially when you have a meeting with three other managers and none of them can stop glancing over at your assistant, whom they are clearly discussing for the entire conversation. Sure, I slide my phone into my pocket and follow him into his immaculate office. I'm struck by how pristine it is, even after nearly a year of working for him. There's nothing on the beige walls, no boxes piled in a corner. The desk is completely bare except for the monitor and the keyboard. Every evening, when Jerry Howell walks out of his office, he leaves absolutely no evidence that he was ever there. He probably missed his calling as a serial killer. Of course, he's only in his mid-40s, plenty of time to take up a new hobby. Um, I'm just going to keep going because it's only like another half page and it's just a delightful first chapter. Maybe it would be less messy if I hit him in the back of the head. That would also be convenient because he's turned away. Wait, did I do this right?
You skipped
No,
a
this
little
is,
bit.
I skipped over. Anyway, I will not continue. That was from another section of the book that I wanted to flag.
Oh, okay.
Um, do you want to continue the next little bit? The next two lines were really good, I remember.
Oops. Oh, I sit down on the chair there. You want me to
Yeah.
start? I sit down on the chair on the other side of his desk and try to put a pleasant expression on my face, one that doesn't betray the fact that I was calmly thinking about him murdering people. A side effect of being accused of murder is that you spend a lot of time thinking about it. You get used to it.
That was what I wanted to get.
Yep.
So her voice is so strong, and we immediately like it's clear from the book jacket copy, it's clear from this that she's been accused of murdering, and she also has dark thoughts, right? There's a lot of like serial killer on the first page, there's beige walls, we're getting fired. She's the prime suspect in a murder investigation. Like there's all this setup, and it's just like so much against her, and yet she's thinking about buying a chicken, which tells us that she's not particularly worried about any of this, which makes you doubt whether or not she's a reliable narrator in and of itself, I think.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Like, the whole point of like buying an apology chicken because you're sorry for your boyfriend that like you kind of seem to not really care that much about. And it's just there's so much said here, and it's a great example. And show don't tell is like this whole thing, right? Like we both talk about this so much in our coaching, as do all of our coach friends, as does everyone everywhere, because it's a really important concept in writing. But this is such a perfect example of show don't tell. She's not telling us how she's feeling about this. She's showing us that there's this chicken and she's been accused of murder, but at no point are we sitting there thinking, oh, I'm pissed about the fact that I'm being accused of murder. We don't know that yet, and we don't need to. And I think that that's a very subtle difference from,
Mhm.
I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Because like we always coach people like, tell us what they're feeling, tell us what they're thinking, translate this for us. And that's something I say to people all the time. But in this case, like it works that we're not hearing exactly what she's feeling internally because we're seeing like I'm being fired. I don't care. I'm sitting at my desk. I'm looking at my phone. They've been thinking about it all day.
Well, you also get the sense that this is someone, right? So, like, she's been, and to your point, like the accusation has not come from the police, right? Like the official, and we don't know this yet, but like we find out
Hmm.
pretty quickly on. The official word is like we don't know who did it. Everybody thinks she did it, but they don't have enough evidence to actually charge her. But what it's
Hmm.
really come from, as you start to find out, is like everybody thinks that she did it. So she's been living with this for years now of like, yeah, everybody says it. And and also I don't know if I did it or not, as we know from the
Right.
jacket copy. So I feel like what you also get in these first few pages is this like person who's had to live with this incredible amount of potential guilt because you don't know what you did, and then also everybody hating you and all the vitriol that comes your way. And so you've had to build this wall to protect yourself, and so it
Such a
has
good
to like
point.
you can't let this get to you. So this stuff is like, well, shit, I'm about to be fired. Well, yeah, I'm gonna just like, what can I do? Like, just like I can't stop them from accusing me of something, so I'm just gonna like I'm gonna Google apology chicken and see what happens. Like, let's stick some lemons up a chicken's butt. That's
Yep,
my favorite line.
it's so good.
But we learn,
That's
we get all of this without her saying, "I have built a wall and to defend myself, and this is my
yes,
protection or whatever." You pick that up from the character just from all the stuff that we've learned here, but she doesn't say that. She doesn't have to.
right.
It's
That's
so
such
brilliantly
that's
done.
so well said. And it's like there is translation there. Like she is
Mhm.
translating that she knows she's going to be fired. There's glass walls. This guy's potentially a serial killer, but or not. She has these dark thoughts. But that's the translation in and of itself. We don't
Yes.
need to know that she's not stressed about it because it's coming through in the way that she's talking about this. And I think that that's elevated translation, right? That's not just saying like, I'm really not that upset I'm about to be fired. It's like I'm looking around this office and observing these things. And in those observations, you reader can tell that I'm really not that stressed out about being fired.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah. It's really, really
Um,
skillfully done.
okay, I want to talk about her. You just made me think of this and make this connection. Like the fact that she keeps picturing murdering people. Um, and it's like these violent fantasies. And I think this is the screenshot that I wanted to yes, this is why I grabbed this. So this was what I started to read. Apologies. Um, this is when she gets back into town. So just to kind of, if you're watching this, you've read it, hopefully, because we're about to spoil
Right.
everything. But this is, we have this first chapter where she gets fired. She goes home. The boyfriend refuses to dump her, and she's like kind of enjoying messing with him.
She comes at him with the kitchen knife, like, "Oh, hi, ha, ha," and then she's just having fun. It's just so good. Like, it's just the character building right up front. It's just so delightful.
Oh, she's so likable. Even if we don't know
Really
that she's a
is.
murderer, it's like it's fantastic. But she's in therapy, right? And so she has these like violent fantasies that this voice that keeps coming up, and the voice kind of changes and ends up being, kind of the core of her emotional arc is like the voice quiets at the end after she actually
Mm.
gets there. Um, but you just made me think that the voice is probably born from all this vitriol coming in and like it not having a outlet. I mean, it's kind of psychotherapy, but like,
Oh, but
how do you
I hadn't
receive
thought
all
about
that
that, but
negative
yeah,
energy,
absolutely. Uh,
right?
when you think about it, well, and I think like it's almost becomes like a little bit of a mini twist.
Yeah.
Is happens at about the midway point that we, and so I don't want to jump on the point that you were making, the little bit that you
Well,
just,
yeah. So, I mean, I just wanted to read this line.
yeah.
So she's back at home and her dad is staring at her, and she knows her parents think that she did it. Like, they're just kind of awful people. And he says, "You have a weird expression. Is something wrong? I'm just tired from the flight." I start to push the murder thoughts away, but every therapist I've been to, and I've been to several, has wanted me to deal with the violent fantasies instead of just trying to make them stop. I recently admitted to my latest therapist that trying to avoid murdering people on my head has just resulted in me murdering even more people on my head. She was very supportive of my idea to just let the thoughts fly and see what happens. So I imagine dad's brain splattering across the couch again and head upstairs to see mom. Like, it's so
Yes,
unhinged.
on the level of like, yeah, I thought maybe I would go for a run, or like wasn't sure if I wanted to go to the gym, so I decided to go upstairs to see my mom. But yet, it's dad's brains being splattered all
Yeah.
over the carpet. It's just
It's
great.
incredible. And there's like, this same page, she talks about how blood is difficult to get out of a couch. And so like it's I mean, I don't know what Amy's goal was with this. But if it was to misdirect the reader and get us to start kind of mistrusting Lucy out of the gate, done. Right?
Yeah,
Because we immediately
absolutely.
think that someone with murderous thoughts is like, she can't remember, but like she totally did it. Right. So then we're on this other side being like, how do you not remember? And all those questions keep coming up. And the connection with the reader, I think, comes in because Lucy herself keeps asking this of herself. She'll be like,
Yeah.
would an innocent person not have gone back to go to the place where Savvy was found? Like,
Mhm.
the fact that I've gone there twice and I've like passed out both times, what does that mean? Like, there's all kinds of questions that the reader is like, huh, yeah, me too. I was just thinking that just really connect us. And it's
Yeah, yeah,
awesome.
all those moments where she's like, an innocent person wouldn't have thought this, or innocent person wouldn't have acted like this, and I just did. So what does that say about me? You
Yeah.
know? And I think that, like, to your point about her being an unreliable narrator, she completely acknowledges that she is an unreliable narrator, which I
Yes.
think sets us up to empathize with her and also believe her more because she's not trying to sell us on the fact that she didn't murder her. She's not trying to sell anybody on the fact. She's been
No.
very upfront. I have no idea what happened. And if you
Right.
ask her, she'll say, maybe I did. I don't know. Like, I would be shocked if I killed her, but I couldn't tell you I don't. Like, I had her blood all over
Right.
me, and I'm sure my skin was under her fingernails, and I had a gash on my forehead. Like, maybe I did. Maybe I
Right.
did.
And like that, I mean, that kind of gets into like almost a horror genre thing where it's
Mhm.
like it's a fate worse than death, right? Like if you can't trust yourself, if you can't trust your own brain or what you think you're capable of, what do you have? You
Right.
know, like what can you rely on? And I think that that just like it's so creepy. And I think that's part of the reason this book is so good is because it explores the concept of like, can you trust yourself really? You know?
Yeah.
Um, okay. So structure, I think this book
Mm.
was it's genius, but like really, really well done. Like there was just so many, like she took the typical at this point because it's been done several times to great effect. Podcast transcript, right? And so but we not only see the actual transcript, we see also the interviews that Ben does. Ben is the podcaster, and then the transcripts of like what he actually says. And so it's like multimedia storytelling, but we're seeing
Mhm.
Lucy. It's only, I mean, if you're calling the podcast like POV, then fine. But we
Mhm.
really only see Lucy's POV in the chapters aside from the multimedia, right?
Yeah, because when we get the podcast transcripts or interviews, however, whether it's the official episode or whether it's like a behind the scenes kind of peek at something,
Yeah,
that is you couldn't even really say like it's Ben's POV sort of, but
sort
it's
of, but
Ben's
it's like the
POV at a remove.
transcript.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it feels like more distance there. So yes, we're really only ever in Lucy's head.
Yeah, the more
Officially.
distance thing is really interesting because again, it's like removing us and she's the target
Yeah.
and it's making us suspectful of what she has been told because we're seeing all these interviews and some of them are like really vicious, you know. There's that one where some high school classmate was like, "Oh, she wouldn't hesitate to cut a bitch." And it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, so now we're going to start questioning this and then you have okay, so again, spoiler alert guys, you know, if you're here, it's spoiled. But Emmett is our supervillain. He's this like nice guy who just, you know, is always there. And Lucy herself, even at one point in the book, is like the guy who, you know, she could kick herself because the guy that she should have been with was right in front of her. And so she falls for, you know,
Yeah.
this kind of like nice attitude and just a sweetheart, you know. And it
Hmm.
turns out he's just like a psychopath who's pissed that she
Hmm.
doesn't love him. Um, so yeah, anything else that struck you about the structure that I just it was very well done, very
Well, I
meted
just
out
wanted to
really well.
say too, oh yeah, very well paced. It was like it wasn't that it wasn't one to one, and it shouldn't have been, but they were very like you got enough that there was no point where like the podcast disappeared for a long period of time. So,
Right, right.
like you want to keep that doesn't have to be one to one, but to keep the balance in there so that, that whole thread doesn't go disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, I mean she's with Ben in her narrative POV. Like she's often with Ben and they're having
Yeah,
conversations and everything. So he doesn't ever like disappear, but you don't want the podcast to disappear either. The only other thing like that I wanted to know, at least right at this moment about the podcast, is when the first one we get, the first break in we get is right after chapter 4, and I just said like, what a great way to info dump without it feeling like an info dump,
totally.
right?
Yes,
Because
yes.
you have to, in a podcast, you have to be setting the scene. You have to open up and tell people where you are, what that is like, and like what the history of it, like the context for everything. And
Yeah.
normally, if you just plop that all down on a page, we'd be like, oh God, like, no, 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 like that's not interesting. And, like we need to break that up. It's just not something that you want to do. But in this case, it works because it's expected, but also you're getting it through. It's not, hi, here's me, Amy, telling you all this stuff. It's Ben narrating for you his experience, which is also telling you all of this contextual information that you need to know. So smart.
It's so smart.
Smart
Yeah,
writing.
and um one thing on that is like when so grandma is this delightful character. Grandma's like the only one who believes in her, right? The whole time. She's amazing. Like so miss my grandma. But
I want to be grandma when I get to
yes.
80. Live in a
Yes.
tiny house and be drinking cocktails at noon if I feel like.
Right? I know, seriously, incredible. Um, but the reason that Lucy comes back to town is, it's a plot device. Grandma's having a birthday, and so she has to come back even though she doesn't want to. And at the same time, she knows this podcast is happening and that he's going to be there. And Grandma encourages her to talk to him because she's talked to Ben and it finds him charming, which he is. He's not a bad guy. But I do remember reading it the first time. I remember wondering if Ben was a bad guy and was like possibly a part of it somehow. And so I just wanted to comment that like in a thriller, and this is a psychological thriller. It's got strong mystery elements because we're solving a
Yeah.
crime, but it's very psychological in terms of
Yes. Like the
yeah,
themes that are running through it, I think, and the things that, like there's a lot of gaslighty type stuff that's happening.
totally. I'm just gonna pop on Amazon and see how they categorized it really
Oh yeah,
fast. I
that's
should have looked this up before. So it's women's crime fiction, um, women's sleuths, which is interesting, and then murder thrillers. Um, and in like I mean, just nailed it. It was New York Times bestseller, Good Morning America book club pick. Stephen King said a world-class whodunit.
doesn't get much more like whoof than that.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, uh the the grandmother telling her to go and talk to Ben, and then there's this point like I marked it down. Yes, right around 50%. And I want to talk to you about the midpoints. This is, I
Mm.
promise, a good segue. Um, Grandma thinks that Ben is trying to set it up so that Matt, or not set it up, but like tell the story that he thinks that Matt did it and Savvy didn't, or I'm sorry, that Lucy did not do it.
Yes.
And Grandma is the one who encourages her to like listen to it. And like that was kind of a big moment where it was like, he doesn't think you did it. But
Hmm.
up until that point, Lucy is convinced that Ben does think that. And
Hmm.
so she's been kind of hostile toward him because why would you like give the person who thinks you did it yet another person more
Right.
ammo? Um, and so it's like a classic misdirection thing, right? Where like 0 to 50%, we have who we think is like the prime suspect, and that's Lucy in this case. And then it kind of switches to Matt, and then it switches to Nina, and then it goes, we kind of find out over time that it's Emmett. Um, but it was pleasing to have that actually match up with what we teach.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think
Um,
I had thinking at that moment, 50% twist. Grandma thinks Matt killed Savvy, and she's awesome. That was
yes,
my notes.
exactly. Yeah. And so I actually the 50% mark I was reading on my phone, so it gives you the percentages like it does in
Yeah.
a Kindle. And 50% exactly was where they go to the wedding venue to where Savvy was found,
Yes,
and she
that's
has
right.
like she freaks out basically. She
Hmm.
almost faints, and she has this moment of like, wouldn't I know if
Hmm.
like would an innocent person do this, or does this indicate guilt? But then I think you're right. I think the actual midpoint turn is where we flip to we think Matt did it, or Ben thinks Matt did it.
I think that is, yeah. And it is, I mean, it's like it's a smidge past 50%, but you and I have talked about like, there's like we use those percentages sort of as guideposts
Yeah,
because they make sense. And that's sort of what like where the expectations happen. But if you're like at 52% instead of 50,
it's
like
fine.
no one's gonna throw your book across the room and Adrian's
No.
not gonna ignore it. Like it's fine. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's kind of the point that I was thinking about is just like it's a good lesson for me to sort of internalize because I do tend to harp on like 50% needs to be like
Oh.
right there. But like it's just somewhere in the midpoint of the book, right? Like it's also dependent on like how much forward matter you have and like whatever, right? So dear readers, you can be a little bit off of 50%, or writers rather. Um Okay, and then from there, it is just like a wild ride, right?
Yes.
So,
Well, because everything like the thing that it does is it definitely it the whole first 50% I think is establishing so much. Like we're learning
yeah,
and again not in an info dumpy like we're still
no,
peeling back some layers, but like it's the expectation setting of like here's how we got here. Here's what was everybody's roles and what they were saying and why they believed those things. And then that 50% when grandma flips the switch and says, "No, actually I think it was Matt." then it all starts to unravel.
Yeah. And I think that's that in itself, I mean, very well said, but
Mm.
it's one of those things with thrillers that can get a little bit confusing when you're approaching like a plot, figuring out what scenes go where. Like it is stacked on the back half with all the
Mhm.
action, right? And that's correct because we do need some build up in the beginning, but it's in no way boring. And I
No.
think part of
Yeah.
the way that she handled that so well was this multimedia stuff because we spend
Mhm.
quite a bit of time, quite a few pages, a lot of real estate in the book is on these interviews. It's on like the actual podcast transcripts. I had a note that there's a flashback to 5 years ago, which I think was the first one.
Hmm.
Um, this is like it's 43%, so it's right before this midpoint, and it's when she and Savvy figured like Savvy's like we should kill Matt, and she's like, "Whoa, dude, back up. Yes, he's a psychopath, and he probably deserves it, but like we're not gonna kill my husband." Like, you know, and that's the first time when we sort of see Savvy in a new light too, because we haven't seen much about her, except that she's like this, like cheerleader type and very pretty and whatever.
And everybody is as we expect, and is a total trope, which she is playing with and playing on, which is very, very smart, of like the
Yeah.
perfect victim, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Lucy says it. She's like, I love Savvy is her best friend. She loves Savvy to death. Well, that's probably a bad way of putting that, but
Yeah.
she's like, they've sanded away all of her rough edges so that she is a perfect victim. And like,
Ugh,
I'm not going to contradict any of that, but I know the truth that like she actually was not. And it is like totally playing with that trope of like, yes, she lit up a room every time she walked into it.
right.
And, we all know that that's BS. Doesn't mean like that you should be a murder victim or whatever, but like,
Right.
yeah, she has a lot of fun, I think, with that and like the expectations around who gets their stories told in these kinds of ways and what that means.
Totally.
So
Yeah. Well, and the tropes of just like a true crime podcast is like a fun thing because these are so popular, right? Like I'm obsessed with them and pretty much everyone I know who writes thrillers is
yep.
obsessed with them. They're super fun. But there is like, like especially Only Murders in the Building and like the advent of like us trying to like meta make fun of them,
Mhm.
where it's like the true crime podcaster is trying to solve the crime like as it's actively being uncovered.
Yep.
And putting characters in like Lucy it's like we see as the reader in the meta way like why Ben chose this,
Hmm.
right? Because it's super fascinating. Like somebody who doesn't remember, like really doesn't remember. And then there's like all this drama. And as we uncover what actually happened that night, like we learned that her mom slept with Savvy's boyfriend on the night of the wedding. And then this all happens like at the family dinner table. And like it's just hilarious, right? Like it's, really like revealing an affair. Her mom is like, for fuck's sake, like, yes, I did. And I
No,
enjoyed it.
it was at grandma's birthday party. Like
Yes.
they're yelling at Ben for like, how dare you air this family's dirty laundry? And like, you don't even know that it's true. And mom's like, no, I fucked him. I did it. I slept with him in the car. And it's just like, everybody's like, oh. And then I think she's like, dad coughs. Dad's sitting in the corner. He coughs. And like, that's it. It's just like, it was just, it's all handled in such a way where it's like these incredibly uncomfortable moments and you're uncomfortable too, but
Yes.
it's so funny. Like
Yes, the
they're all
comedy,
just a disaster.
just a disaster and like unapologetically so,
Mhm.
right? Like, and then the more we learn about Lucy, the more we learn that like she was sleeping around on Matt and like Matt was this charming guy, but also he's a total psychopath because he's crazy abusive, but in such a
Uh-huh.
way that he's gaslighting people as he abuses them into thinking that they're abusing him because they fight back.
It was
And like
actually that bit was heartbreaking in a way where like,
totally, yeah.
like his second wife was very much like, yeah, no, she and I don't say like Lucy allowed herself to get gaslit because
God
she
no.
did fight
Yeah.
back and good for her. But like Julia's the second wife. She didn't. And she knew when he would try to tell her, like, you hit me. She's like, no, I fucking didn't.
Yeah.
Whereas Lucy was like, well, I know I did. And so then that made her start for someone who's in so many other ways is such a strong character. The fact that like that piece of it broke my heart where she was just like, well, I'm not a perfect victim. Like I fought back. So
Yes.
I don't
Yes.
want this secret of my marriage to get out. because people are going to be like, oh, well, why didn't you leave? And like, oh, not that you deserved it, but like you fought back. Like you can't fight back. And it's just like, oh my God, like, please, you've been so great in so many other ways. Like, I don't want you to think this about yourself. Ah,
I know.
it was awful.
It's like, I don't really want to get into like the abuse conversation because I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's happens and it's awful and like it's awful. But I don't think that very many stories have touched on the concept of like she says this in the book, like I think it's in Lucy's voice where do you remember exactly? It was like women who fight back are like psychopaths or something,
Yes,
and men who do this are just abusive. But it's
yes,
like, and it also just the more that it got out, what she was worried about is that it was painting her in a negative light. And there's this whole kid, this guy that she punched when she was in high school because he was being handsy. Um,
yeah,
like,
he was sexually harassing one of her classmates, and she
right.
went and reported it, and nothing happened to him. So she
And so
punched.
she punched him and she broke his nose. But that's something that keeps coming up. It's like, oh, Lucy is violent. Lucy is violent. She must have killed Savvy.
Yep.
Right. And so this whole narrative of like, you just can't win.
Which is
Um,
true. I think
except she does
any
in the
woman
end.
who's reading this is just like, yep, God, this is all too familiar.
Yeah. And so, I mean, in terms of, I didn't actually pick up on this before until we started talking about this just now, but it's like a feminist anthem as well. It's like standing up against all of this negativity and all of this vitriol. And like, she has a line at the very end where she's like, Savvy was the only person who ever tried to take care of me aside from her grandma.
Yeah,
And after that heartbreaking moment where she realizes that Matt gaslit her parents and her parents just bought into it, that she would have killed her best friend. And like you just like you see her like rise from the ashes at that moment. And I guess I want to talk about the emotional arc now because that's kind of what I'm getting
great.
at. But like
Do it.
um, what do you think the emotional aha was in this? And for new listeners, though, we have this concept of an emotional aha moment where like somebody realizes that what they believed, this misbelief they've had for the whole book, it's that turning point, that flip of the filter where they realize like, oh, usually it's something like, I'm not worthy of love, but yes, I am, or I can't do it too, I can do it. And so I'm curious what your thoughts were on what Lucy's like emotional flip looked like.
I mean, in thinking about it now, I think it has to be that like she comes to realize that she can trust herself,
Yeah,
right?
me too. Me
Because
too.
that moment where like, and it was in chapter 53, I've written down like literally my first note in chapter 53 is in all caps, yes. Because Lucy tells her parents and Matt, like she's walking out of the hospital and she's like, oh, by the way, the police have some questions for you because they've obstructed, they've hidden
Yeah,
evidence, and they've told themselves and Lucy that they've done all of this for her.
for her.
Now
Yeah,
she's had this final, she's realized like, oh, fuck no. It's you are doing this for you because you didn't want your secrets to come out. You didn't want to upset the apple cart. You thought all of this. And so, like, no, all this time that I have not been believing myself and questioning myself as to whether I could do this, all because you guys put some things in motion because you didn't want your dirty laundry coming out. Like, no, no,
yeah,
no, 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 no. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm trusting myself and have a nice life. Kind of
yeah.
thing.
It's like all of this uncomfortable stuff that she's dealt with, like all of it just comes into like, that moment, that crystallization moment. And it was just so well done. So
Yeah.
bravo,
Was that yours too?
brava.
Is that like
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you was okay,
exactly.
great.
I mean,
Yeah,
it
good.
the whole thing about like the truth doesn't matter was kind of another way of looking at it, where she thinks the truth doesn't matter because and it's like it's a level above that, but like it's because she can't trust herself, right? And so what is the truth?
Yeah.
Does it even matter if everyone else thinks that I've done it? Like,
Well, there was a thing, and I thought I had written it down, and now I can't find it in my notes. But it was a little bit earlier. But she says something, and it is in that sort of final climactic moment where
yeah,
there's a few chapters because their chapters are nice and short. Like
yeah,
this moves,
it does.
which is
One
lovely.
one sitting read.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that she says, and Ben also acknowledges it too. It's just like, well, she can tell. She's like, I can tell my story. It can be totally the truth, but like, if no one's gonna believe me, they're gonna believe you. And he says, like, yes, absolutely, you're right. Like that is true. And as it turns out, he lies for her
Hmm.
because it's it's like the bigger truth of like, yeah, she didn't, but like she didn't, or Emmett didn't actually ever say, I killed Savvy. But we all
Right.
know that he killed Savvy. We know from
Yeah.
Lucy and from his actions and everything, like, it's not in question. But because he never said it, like, technically, Ben then tells the cops, I heard him say it. And Lucy's like, oh,
Right.
no, he's lying. But, like, if I said it, they wouldn't believe me. If Ben had said,
Yeah.
"Oh, I didn't hear it," but blah, like there's like this is what has to be done in order for the
In
truth
order
to
for
really
the
come out.
justice, chaos brought to order, like all
Yeah.
this stuff. Yeah.
And
And
then it
the,
has to come from Ben and not from Lucy. It has to come from him
yeah,
as a man, as the third party podcaster, as
right.
all of those things. Like it's very, very nicely done to like just again sort of point a finger at like, look at this over here. Like
Exactly.
this is the shit that we have to deal with.
Exactly. God. Yeah. Ugh. Um, okay. I strongly agree with everything you just said. So the whole like the subplot of Matt and the second wife I thought was really well done. That was like it was done well and at a time when we start to suspect Matt and we're pretty convinced he did it. And then, we learn that he was there that night, but not in the way that we thought he was, right? And so the other big thing I want to talk about is like Savvy is a murderer. She straight up stabbed a guy multiple times because he was trying to sexually assault her. And like, sure, her whole thing is like, I don't feel bad about it. He deserved it. And so does your shitty husband,
I
right?
just kind of love where she was like, they were talking about it, and Lucy's like, well, couldn't you go out to the cops with self-defense? And she was like, yeah, I
Not with
maybe
the
stabbed him a few more times than it could be like just like considered self-defense, but I'm not sorry. He deserved it, every bit of
exactly.
it.
Right. And like that purity of just like, yes, this was justice and I took it. And, it's just the strength there. Like I like admire her, even though that's completely unhinged as a response.
It's
Sexual
true.
assault is awful and should never happen,
Hmm.
but it does. But like murdering someone because of it, I just forget this. Another conversation that's not about this podcast. But anyway, so we learned that Savvy does this and we learned it at 60%. So like Matt or the episode where Matt is being accused or like strongly hinted at that he's the bad guy comes out at 50%, right? Matt confronts them, her and Ben when they're hanging out. And then, they sleep together, which was hot. And then we learn that Savvy killed somebody, and this is what um Lucy knew. And then she goes and she talks to Savvy's little sister and they bond and she finds another like ally in this. And it's sort of just, we're cruising along and we sort of almost feel contrary to honestly like the thriller structure of like Lucy's getting better and better, like she's feeling better and better that she might not have done this up until the point where she crashes again. And she
Hmm.
has that dark night of the soul where it's just like, my God, did I? Like she remembers the branch and she remembers being there and she wonders, like, did I do this? And so
Yeah.
that was the super interesting part is that the climactic face off is with her. She has to face her
Yeah.
own memories in order to figure out that she didn't do it. And so the true villain is Emmett, and we learn that like in the final twist. But my God, the climactic thing, like we thought it was Matt, we thought it was Nina, and then we're right back to like the core of this story is that she has to face herself, which is like the emotional arc. So
Yeah, which is really, really, I mean, it's so smart, especially when you've set it up to like, how much can she trust of herself? So even if she's going
yes,
through this climactic moment and she's learning these things and she thinks she knows, does she really? Like we are still questioning it until the final moments there where we find
yeah,
out, okay, this is how it actually all unfolded. So yeah,
yeah.
it's really, really smart. I think that's
And
probably, oh,
sorry, go on.
no, I was done.
Okay. Um, it's also like the entering into the climactic scene. So it's a lot of agency. Like she goes and she grabs Ben and she's like, we are going to this wedding venue and I'm going to face this shit. And she has not had her realization at that point. She doesn't know that she can trust herself. She's making this brave choice after being like worst night, dark night of the soul, making this choice, goes and faces it, remembers all kinds of stuff. It's
Mhm.
very difficult. And then at the end of that scene is when she realizes that Emmett was the person there and she remembers that she and Savvy were happy. And I think that the aha moment was kind of when she realized that she couldn't have killed Savvy because they were happy. They were planning to go to LA together.
Yes.
Like, and that is like the core origin story back here that caused her to have the misbelief that she can't trust herself. is then faced, and that's what caused her to realize like, oh, I can trust myself. So now it's like, what really happened? And then Savvy actually says in her memory, like, take this fucker down for me or something, or like,
Well, the thing that I thought was really fun about the voice is like, I mean, it starts off right away. I'm like, you read it in chapter one, pretty much on
yeah,
page one. We know she's having all of these thoughts, and they get louder and louder, and she's
yeah,
thinking, and then like there is that moment, and it's about 40%, I think, or somewhere around there, where it's like we realize, like she says, like it's Savvy. Savvy is the voice in her head, and then you're like,
right,
and it's just another little like it wasn't quite a twist, but it was a moment where like, ooh. Ooh, it's not just like you're questioning, you are doing all of those things. It was serving as all of those things that you talked about earlier, but also
yeah,
like it's giving you this whole new perspective on Savvy as like, why is Savvy the voice nerd? Why is she the person who's
right,
saying killer? And then, you know, when you learn more at the 60% mark, when you learn that Savvy is like, she killed somebody and she wants to kill Matt, and it's like gonna go all like not Thelma and Louise because that was you know, suicide, but like yeah,
yeah,
like empowering in a to an nth violent degree.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's just great. And you know, like the climactic like realizes that Emmett was there, and then going and facing Emmett, and then or no, Emmett comes, does she go to face him?
She goes to see
She
him.
goes to see him, and then Nina is there, and
Nina is there. Nina
he tries to
leaves.
kiss her, and he gets
Yes.
upset, and because she doesn't quite believe what happened, right? She doesn't have the full memory of
Right.
what that he was there. And again, we see him attack them, but we see him kill. No, we do see that in her memory, him swinging the branch and hitting Savvy.
Yeah, but it's broken up. It doesn't come in one like
Yeah,
long sequence. It's like it goes back and forth a little bit between the 5 years ago. So we're actually like seeing her
that's right.
remember, and
Yeah.
then it comes back to the present, and then it goes back. So it's broken up into chunks in a way that is like pretty seamless,
It's
you know.
seamless, and it was incredibly effective in terms of pacing, because you're just like,
Mhm.
you don't ever learn anything enough that you feel like you can put the book down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You
Like,
want to know what's happening next. Like, okay,
yeah. Like I
you're
was
right at
late
that point
to
where like, it's right there. It's right there. Okay, I'm not putting it down until it's done.
Yeah. Like I was late to record this call because I was finishing reading the last like 10% of the book again, and I wanted to have it fresh in my head, and I texted Carrie and was like, I'm gonna be 5 minutes late. I'm really sorry. I have to finish. But it's because I couldn't put it down. Like it's so engaging. Um, yeah, it's just great. So
Yep.
hopefully, I mean, do you have anything else you want to add? I think that was everything I wanted to talk about.
No,
I
I mean like
just,
there's yeah, it's just it's so well done on so many levels, and I really love it as you know, not every book has to be like the voiciest thing, so I don't think like
yeah,
that's not something that is a requirement, but when it's done and it's done well, like I will always think of this book as like something that is
yeah,
voicey and just like nailed it in terms of tone, you know, like the humor and the sarcasm and all how that like feeds into all of the other things that she's thinking about on the page and
yeah,
getting us to think about. Just genius.
yeah. I think so too. I will just do a plug for Ben's assistant Paige, was like a fantastic character.
She
When she
was,
when she walks in on them after they've slept together for like the second or third time or whatever, and she's like, "Are you fucking serious?"
right?
Like it's just like it's yeah,
It's
it's
perfect.
great.
It's perfect. It's really, really good. So
It's wonderful. So, Amy Tintera, 5 stars from us. Very, very well
absolutely.
done. Thank you for writing this book. It's a gift to the thriller community, and
Yeah.
we appreciate you. And I think that is all for us. So,
I think we just to put on our like forever caveat that as genius and skillful as this was, like this did not just spring forth fully
no,
formed from her head. So please do not compare your work in progress to this because you know this has been through a lot of time and editing and revision and on and all of the things to get it to this state. So learn from it because it's
yes.
a wonderful mentor text on a lot of different levels, but also don't think like, well, I did my book is not like this, so I can't do it. You can.
Yeah. I mean, the structure, like all of that was like many moving pieces over time. I'm willing to bet like a lot of money. And you know, the core of the idea of like this hook of like, you don't know if you killed your best friend, and then what if there's a podcast researching that, I assume was kind of the core of the initial. But then all of everything, like honestly, the sex positivity with Lucy being unapologetically
Yeah.
like okay with all of it. And like I love that aspect of it too. Like
And
it's
grandma too. Don't forget about grandma.
grandma,
Grandma was getting it.
grandma,
Love
love
her.
her. All right. So thank you, listeners.
On that note.
Yes, go to shadowsandsecretsretreats.com. That is
Mhm.
our website, right?
That is our website, yes.
Okay, we keep messing it up. It's yes, you will find us. We would love to have you at the second retreat in 2025, and I believe the dates are announced today.
Oh yes.
Even
I
though
haven't done it yet, but we were going to, so I will when
yes,
we're done
even
here.
though this recording will not be today, we are recording this on Halloween, hence the black. So,
Yes. That's the
um,
black. Like we're not always in black, please.
I know that's my favorite color. All right, thanks everyone. See you
Thank
next
you so
time.
much. See you next time.